The contemporary conflict over human sexuality and gender represents a profound ontological war, a dispute over the exact nature of physical reality itself. We remain trapped in a Cartesian legacy. Since René Descartes, Western thought has been characterized by a substance ontology, a view that reality must be divided into either conscious, thinking mind or mechanical, meaningless matter. This division has birthed two opposing titans of the modern syllabus. On one side stand the teleological objectivists, on the other, the existential constructivists. Their conflict centers on a single question: does the physical human body dictate an objective moral reality, or is biology merely a linguistic architecture enforced by institutional power? Understanding modern theories of the body requires muting the political noise to examine the raw, uncompromising philosophical machinery operating at the foundation of both camps. We will use a methodological tool called epoche. This phenomenological practice requires us to bracket our modern assumptions, allowing us to observe human conscious experience in its unadulterated, unfiltered form. Applying this bracket reveals the consequences of the debate. A human body with a preordained nature renders any defiance a delusion, while a body that is a blank slate makes any biological norm an act of tyranny. We are going to map the foundational axioms of both paradigms side by side. We will track how their initial definitions of nature cascade logically into entirely divergent worldviews. In this ontological war, each side views the other's philosophy as a clinical pathology. The teleological paradigm begins with a strict axiom: nature is an active, structured reality, rather than a mute blank slate waiting for human culture to write upon it. This model views the human body as a rigorous biological armature. This armature is endowed with objective, a priori values, meaning these values exist prior to and independent of any human experience. This anatomical diagram illustrates its affordances, the mechanical and structural realities dictating how humans interact with the world. Because of these boundaries, the body possesses telos, a preordained directionality preceding consciousness. Ethically, one must align their mind with these objective physiological realities. This ancient, objective view of biology differs from the modern, natural scientific attitude. The scientific approach abstracts meaning away from the physical form, treating the human body merely as a series of dead causes and effects. For the teleologist, biology is destiny, because the physical architecture of the flesh defines the moral boundaries of human action. If biological reality is an objective, undeniable fact, we must account for the massive contemporary drive to deconstruct it. The phenomenologist Max Scheler provided a framework to diagnose this cultural denial. Scheler frames the rejection of objective biology as a psychological toxicity. He diagnoses it through the concept of resentment. Resentment is a state of internal impotence, where a subject is unable to attain or embody a specific natural value or biological norm. Unable to fulfill that norm, the subject protects their ego through a value inversion. They rewrite reality, declaring the unattainable norm illusory or oppressive. This inversion results in Wertblindheit, or value blindness. The subject becomes so blinded by this psychological defense that they perceive the natural reality as worthless, illusory, or purely socially constructed. From the teleological standpoint, the post-structuralist movement represents a systemic pathological resentment masking an inability to fulfill biological telos. Now we pivot. Constructivist and existential thinkers observe the exact same physical body, yet they extract an entirely different ontology from it. This counter-movement finds its foundational expression in the work of Simone de Beauvoir, whose intervention dismantled biological essentialism for 20th century thought. Beauvoir operates on the axiom that nature provides mere raw material. The physical world contains no inherent moral values or preordained destinies. She defines the body as a situation rather than a fixed thing. A situation is a set of physical facts that must be interpreted and negotiated by human consciousness. In this view, humans define themselves by dealing with nature on their own account. We apply our own values to the flesh rather than submitting passively to biology. From the constructivist perspective, claiming a social norm is rooted in objective biology constitutes an epistemological fraud designed to cancel human freedom. Michel Foucault takes this existential constructivist view and weaponizes it to strike directly at the teleologists. Foucault develops the concept of biopower. This systemic institutional apparatus uses biology to categorize, regulate, and control human populations. This diagram illustrates two definitions of life: zoe, the mere biological survival of an organism, and bios, the self-formed reality of human existence. Institutions operate biopower by elevating zoe into strict law, using this framework to actively erase the aesthetic potential of bios. Foucault's required countermeasure is an aesthetics of existence. This approach treats bodies and pleasures as pure, unformed matter, material that can be voluntarily shaped and reshaped at will. Foucault describes this continuous self-creation as a deliberate ethical stylization. It is a constant struggle to ferret out the fascism of biological essentialism that institutions have successfully implanted inside our own heads. For Foucault and the constructivists, biological teleology functions as a hostile, systemic architecture of power engineered to dominate marginalized groups. We now have our two models in direct collision. The teleologists accuse the constructivists of resentment, while the constructivists accuse the teleologists of enforcing fascist biopower. This post-structuralist model relies on a specific understanding of power. It treats power as a primary substance, a generative force capable of manufacturing the human body and sexuality from scratch. However, examining the mechanics of power reveals that it is a purely relational phenomenon. Power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires a subject and an object to act upon. Because power is relational, it depends entirely on the pre-existing properties of the things it attempts to manipulate. It is not a creator, but a parasite. A parasite cannot exist without a host. Therefore, social power structures inevitably hijack and conform to the a priori affordances of the flesh. The chain is forced to follow the curve of the bone. It cannot invent a new one. Power dynamics manipulate biological reality, but they cannot erase the objective architectural limits of the human body. This brings us to the philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who provides a path to integrate these two planes. Merleau-Ponty develops the flesh of the world. He describes a pre-reflective milieu where the sensible environment and sentient observer are indistinct. By locating human experience within this flesh, he demonstrates the distinction between a natural plane and a cultural plane is an illusion. His conclusion integrates both planes. Everything in us is entirely cultural, and everything in us is entirely natural. Our biology and our social constructions are carved from the exact same ontological tissue. We are left with the inescapable ambiguity of the human condition. We are bound by the absolute finitude of our biological destiny, while remaining entirely responsible for the historical canvas we paint over it. The next time you read Foucault or Shaler, do not simply accept their conclusions. Look closely at the text and ask yourself, which version of nature are they secretly smuggling into the argument to make their philosophy work?